Hello and welcome to this AWS webinar. Today we'll be talking about how to build a business case for AWS using Migration Evaluator, a complementary service offered by AWS. My name is Paul Wakeford. I'm a solutions architect working in the Migration Evaluator team. I'll be joined later by Aaron Rallo, General Manager for Migration Evaluator, who'll be taking your questions in a live Q&A session. Migrating to the cloud can have many reasons, but they all really come down to money. Either more money coming in or less money going out. You may want to migrate to AWS to increase your business agility. And increased agility means you can develop and release products quickly, which is likely to earn you more money. Or you may have merged with another company and ended up with duplication of services and servers. If you can identify and remove those duplicates, you can save money. You may have your own data centers that are coming to the end of their life, and they'll need a big investment to get back up to date. If you can avoid that investment and instead shut down those data centers, you can save money. But to get started on your migration journey, you really need a business case. You need to be able to make a data-backed decision to migrate. So the question is, how do you gather that data? Do you know exactly how many servers you have running now? Do you know the specifications of all those servers? Do you know their utilization at their peak and at your quiet periods? Can you identify the costs for your individual applications? How about your different compute environments? Do you know the size and the cost of your benchmarking, UAT or DR environments at the moment, or how they would look migrated to AWS? This is all data that you could try to capture manually on spreadsheets. You could export some point-in-time utilization data from your hypervisors, maybe try to match them up to Amazon EC2 instance sizes. You could go server by server, line by line, build up your costs. But that's a laborious, time-consuming process and is very prone to error. So, to solve this problem, AWS introduces Migration Evaluator. Migration Evaluator is a complementary service powered by TSO Logic, an infrastructure matching service with many years of experience in assessing on-premises infrastructure and making data-backed migration recommendations. Migration Evaluator ingests your on-premises server inventory and, using the specifications of your servers, produces an on-premises estimate including the cost of server hardware, power, cooling, storage, virtualization costs, operating systems, and Microsoft SQL Server costs. We use those server specifications, along with your real utilization data, to identify servers which are underutilized or completely unused. We detect Microsoft and Linux operating systems, as well as Microsoft SQL Server workloads. We use this data to produce cost models showing the difference between bring your own license and license included scenarios, so you can directly compare them and see which is the best fit for your business. And the end goal is to produce migration recommendations so that you can identify the right-sized and lowest cost infrastructure option for each of your applications and environments. And right-sizing is important. An unoptimized lift and shift migration can leave you with higher infrastructure costs than your current on-premises costs. We did a study that used a sampling of 100,000 servers running across various enterprises and found that unoptimized migration would cost 20% more than current on-premises costs. Of course, there would be other benefits of a cloud migration, business agility, scalability, moving to an OpEx model and so on. But it's very hard to gather enthusiasm and momentum for a migration when the forecast is for higher infrastructure costs. But look at the difference when we right-size our migration. We see a 36% reduction in infrastructure costs. This is largely due to over-provisioning and underutilization of on-premises servers. So you really need to be sure to right-size when you move to AWS. We also analysed Microsoft SQL Server assessments to identify license optimization savings. By right-sizing the database instances and leveraging optimized CPUs at AWS, Microsoft SQL Server license savings went from an on-premises requirement of 9,293 to 4,736 when optimized in AWS. That's a total core saving of 4,557, or 49%. So, where does Migration Evaluator fit in the migration journey? Well, we are positioned at the very beginning, in the assess phase. We don't require any agent to be installed on your servers. We don't look at processes running on your servers or query usernames or look at any of your file data. So we have a really low bar to entry. The output of Migration Evaluator includes a directional business case that you can use to create the case for change and to justify a deeper dive into each of your applications. It's a very common pattern for the results of a Migration Evaluator assessment to be fed into the mobilize phase, where you may want to use an agent on each server, and AWS offers Application Discovery Service as part of a suite of migration tools in our Migration Hub. You can also leverage our professional services teams in this phase. But that's all a step past the initial assessment. Migration Evaluator also integrates with another AWS service, which is right at the other end of the migration journey, and that's Cloud Endure. Cloud Endure provisions Amazon EC2 instances and can use the right-sized server recommendations provided by Migration Evaluator to size those instances. This is a great way to speed up migration for suitable workloads and to perform an optimized, right-sized lift and shift migration with minimal effort. To be able to make right-size recommendations, we need server specifications and either real utilization data or a way to assume utilization for those servers. We have two ways that we can use to gather that data. The first option is to use an existing data source. If you already have a tool that can export server specifications and environment data, we can use it. This is the kind of information that is commonly stored in a configuration management database, or CMDB. If you have partial data, perhaps you use a tool that has a per server fee, so you use it to monitor your production servers, but do not use it for your development servers. We can use our experience in doing thousands of these assessments and suggest values to fill those gaps. We could use a value of, say, 30% for CPU and 50% memory utilization just for those development servers. Using your existing data is a great way to get really fast results, as there is no utilization collection period required. However, the accuracy of the match process will be slightly reduced if we do have to assume those utilization figures. So, for a more accurate match, you can use our data collector. The Migration Evaluator Data Collector is a piece of Microsoft Windows software that runs in your own data center. There is no agent required to be installed on your servers. The collector software is self-contained and gathers the required inventory and utilization data from your infrastructure using industry standard protocols. We can use the VMware API for VMware VMs, WMI for Hyper-V VMs, WMI or SNMP for Windows Bare Metal Service, SNMP for Linux servers, and TSQL for Microsoft SQL servers. And we can also collect from other hypervisor guests using WMI or SNMP. When you configure the data collector, an initial inventory scan is performed, and then we gather time series utilization data every 10 to 15 minutes. Gathering time series data allows us to see all the peaks and the valleys of usage over the collection period, so we can make accurate right-sizing decisions. We're also concerned about the security of the data that we collect, so we supply an encryption certificate that is specific for you to encrypt your collected data, and all data is encrypted end-to-end. The collection phase normally takes 2 weeks, and we can align that period to capture data from any specific period that you may want, such as end-of-month processing, or to capture increased usage that relates to a marketing event that you're planning. Or you may want us to avoid that marketing event so that the bump in usage does not skew your results. The timing is completely your choice. At the end of the collection phase, we analyse all the data and we produce 2 deliverables. The first output of the assessment is the Migration Evaluator analytics engine. This is a web-based console which allows you to view your on-premises infrastructure data, compare different AWS cost model scenarios, build your own scenarios, and see groupings of your infrastructure by environment or by application. You can even drill all the way down into single servers to see their individual costs and their specifications. You can export all the results and do much more. Now let's do a demo and see this in more detail. This is the Migration Evaluator analytics engine. Migration Evaluator leverages TSO Logic technology as part of the assessment. The viewer is divided into 3 main sections. On the left-hand side, we have a row of icons, and I've selected the charting icon. Next, we have the pivot area, and here is where we can show different areas of the infrastructure. Here we have the environment pivot, and beneath that you can see the different environments that we have for this particular dataset. We also have an application pivot where we can look at the different applications, and there are other pivots for operating systems and locations. On the right hand side we have the data area, and the data area, as you can see, updates as we move around these pivots. So I can select the top of the environments and show data for all of these environments. You can see data for idle guests, for CPU and memory usage, and for storage and power costs as well. We can click into one of these environments and see the costs just for example, here the development environment, and you see the data has all updated here to show you just the development area. And we can drill down deeper into applications within development, into sub-applications, even down into individual bare metal servers and VMs and see their individual stats. This is the time series section, so you can see the graph here is showing time series data. You can see the date and the time going from left to right. And this is one of the great differentiators of Migration Evaluator compared to some of the other tools. We do use time series data, and that time series data allows us to see the high points and the low points of the utilization of your infrastructure and make a really good recommendation for rightsizing. Next, let's look at the usage and cost area. Usage and cost summarizes that time series data. So we will go out and look at the utilization of your infrastructure every 10 to 15 minutes and categorize your servers in one of these 4 main areas. If the utilization figures come back as over our threshold, which is around 5%, we would categorize that server as being in use. If the server came back as below that threshold, we would categorize that server as idle. If every time we collected utilization data from that server, it came back as below the threshold, we'd categorize that server as a zombie. Zombie servers, we haven't detected any utilization for them, so they are strong candidates to not be migrated to AWS. And the final category is expected idle. And these are servers such as VMware templates, where we know that they are not actually going to be used as a running server. And again, they do not need to be migrated to AWS. You can see at the top here we have the total costs for each of those categories, and underneath we have the percentages of your infrastructure for each of those categories. And on the right hand side we have some storage costs and utilization figures as well. Again, this data all does update as you move around these different pivots, so we can highlight the same figures for development, down to the application level, or even again down to the individual server level. Next, let's look at the device settings options. Here's where we can look at the specifications for each individual server. Here I've selected a VM. We can see the name of the VM. We can see the OS that we detected. You can see the number of CPUs that this server has, the amount of memory it has, the IP address, and some other information as we were able to detect from the server itself. So it's very useful to be able to drill down into each individual server, and you can actually identify servers and check their actual specifications. You can do this again from any of these other pivots as well. So if it's easier for you to identify a server by application, you can do that too. Next, let's look at the cost modeler. And we'll go up to the top of our environment pivot again here. The cost modeler is divided into two main areas. At the top here, we have the on-premise inventory with estimated costs. And when we look at the directional business case later in this presentation, I'll show you what's included in that estimate and what is not included. But broadly, we do try to make the same inclusions and exclusions for the on-premise costs as we do for the Amazon AWS costs. Below the on-premise inventory, we have the AWS cost model scenarios. There may be one or more cost model scenarios. I've got two here. The first one is for London, and the second one is a US cost model scenario in North Virginia. So you can see how you can have multiple cost models, and you can compare directly between the two different cost models. Each cost model has two sections. On the left, we have the direct match option. This is where we ignore any of that server utilization data that we collected, and we just use the specifications of the servers and do a direct match into Amazon EC2. So if we take a single server as an example, if that server had 64 vCPUs on-premise, we would match it to a 64 vCPU Amazon EC2 instance. Now obviously you can see that this is the unoptimized migration, the unoptimized lift and shift option, and it is significantly not cost optimal. So let's have a look at the right-sized figures here on the right-hand side. And here is where we are taking that utilization data into account. And we're saying, well, that 64 vCPU server that you have on premise, maybe it's only 20% utilized. So we'll find a 16 vCPU Amazon EC2 instance to match it to. And we do a server by server match in the same way. And we remove those zombie servers. We said that we don't need them, so there's no point in migrating them, and we can pull those out of the cost model. You can see here how we can compare the two regions. One here is for London, and the one down here is for the US North Virginia. And we do have the full Amazon EC2 price catalog for all public regions, so we can do this direct cost comparison. You can, if you choose to, add your own cost model scenario, and the scenario builds almost instantly. I will very quickly show you here how to do this. We'll maybe say we'll have a 3-year, we'll go for Canada. We select our region. And we'll leave out all the other options by their default, but I will just point out here that by default we do use Amazon license included cost models. If you do have a Microsoft Enterprise Agreement that includes license mobility, you can select the license mobility option and we can build cost models that take that into account. So you don't have to rebuy your Microsoft licenses, and you can bring them over to Amazon AWS. There are some other options around storage here, but we'll ignore those for now, and I'll just click on Save. So you can see, just scroll it down here, you can see here's my Canada. There's been no fast forwarding through the video here. This is all in real time. So this is my Canadian option, and you can see the cost model built almost instantly, and you can see the comparative costs for that particular region. Again, we can look at different pivots here. So the cost model scenarios will all update as I do this. I can look at a development environment and just look at the on-premise inventory and the cost estimate for the development environment, and also for those cost model scenarios again. We can do this from an application perspective. It's a very handy way of getting buy-in from your application stakeholders if you can show them their current on-premise inventory and their estimated costs, and then their AWS right-sized costs. It's a really good way of getting that buy-in and getting a bit of migration momentum. Finally, I wanted to show you the Excel export options and the Cloud Endure export. So we mentioned earlier that Migration Evaluator does integrate with Cloud Endure. We can export our right-size recommendations, and they can be used as a source for Cloud Endure to provision directly into Amazon EC2. But we can also export as an Excel file. So if you want to do any further processing outside of what you want to do within the viewer, you can do that, and you can get line-by-line details of all the servers that we detected, their inventory, their utilization, both for CPU, memory and storage, details of their OS, details of their licensing, and you can also see the EC2, Amazon EC2 match that we made. Some of these are blanks, meaning that they are those zombie servers, so we don't recommend matching at all. And you can go all the way over and get individual line-by-line costs per server, both for your current on-premise environment and for your AWS right-sized environment. That completes the demonstration of the Migration Evaluator analytics engine. Let's move back to the presentation. The second deliverable for a Migration Evaluator assessment is the Directional business case, which is designed to support your decision to go ahead with the migration to AWS. Let's look at an example Directional business case now. We start with the scope and the parameters of the assessment. We show the number of servers included and their storage, the data collection method and the time period, some details of the source of the SQL Server edition information, and the percentage of servers that could be categorized by environment or by application. In the executive summary, we show the overall headline figures for on-premises costs and the right-size costs in AWS. We show the percentage of servers that were completely unused, those zombie servers, and also the number of servers that had very low levels of utilization, which we call idle servers. We show the AWS cost model parameters, whether licenses are included or not, the term options, and the region. And we support all public regions except China, but also including GovCloud. We call out any potential refinements. In this example, we didn't have any information about the licensing model we could use, or for the usage patterns for those dev test workloads. We call those things out so you know what can be done to make the assessment even more accurate. If you provide this missing information later, we can refine the cost model further. Next, we have a more detailed view of the on-premises costs, showing what we include and what we exclude in this estimate. The estimate includes server costs based on our database of server pricing, the costs of storage attached to those servers, the cost of power and cooling for those servers, any OS and hypervisor licensing costs, and any SQL licensing costs. We exclude costs such as labor costs, any migration tooling, any partner costs, the costs for storage that is not attached to servers, any application software costs, and any networking costs. We try to compare apples to apples as best as we can. So we also exclude costs that are excluded from the AWS cost model. So these excluded costs here are excluded from both sides of the comparison. And your business case will have at least one page showing the right-sized AWS costs and the parameters of the particular cost model. In this example, this cost model is for Amazon EC2 instances in the North Virginia region. It uses a 3-year upfront payment model, which is used because it is similar to traditional physical server purchase models. And this also includes Microsoft Windows and SQL Server licenses. All pricing is retail pricing, so we recommend talking to an AWS account team member or to a partner at this point to determine your eligibility for any programs which provide discounts or credits, and these can further reduce your costs. We can create multiple cost models for comparison in the directional business case, just as we saw in the analytics engine, so you can compare different payment terms or target different regions, or examine the differences between bring your own license and license included models. Now let's look at an example of a customer using Migration Evaluator. Koch has grown over the last 90 years to become the second largest private company in the US, with around 130,000 employees in 60 countries. The scope of their assessment included 5,000 servers across 6 data centers. Migration Evaluator, formerly known as TSO Logic, forecasted the referenced savings potential. 48% savings when running on AWS versus on-premises, 26% savings on dev test workloads, 22% savings on SQL Server workloads when moving to AWS, and 10% reduction in SQL Server core count. The Koch and Migration Evaluator cloud journey started out by mapping high-level costs for light compute and storage. Then, they identified where IaaS should be treated differently than on-premises by optimizing through rightsizing and shutting down non-production resources when not in use. Koch used data as part of the business justification for the enterprise to adopt the cloud and to consolidate from 6 data centers down to 1. And Migration Evaluator provided a clear analysis for each of the 11 Koch CIOs to align on the path forward. So how do you get started with a Migration Evaluator assessment today? If you are brand new to AWS, simply search for AWS Migration Evaluator using your favorite search engine, and you will see our assessment request form. Fill in the details, and one of our migration experts will contact you to receive your existing data or to arrange to provide the collection software. If you're already working with an AWS account team, reach out to them and they can kick off the process for you. Or if you have a relationship with an AWS partner, they can request an assessment via their APN partner portal. However you choose to engage the Migration Evaluator team, the result will be a directional business case based on your own data and access to your own analytics engine viewer that together fully justify your migration to AWS. That concludes the webinar today. Thanks for watching. Please stay with us for the Q&A with the General Manager of Migration Evaluator, Aaron Rallo.